Well, I think that, what we're going to get into now is when the wheels really start rolling in the GWAT and things like that. But before, what made you want to go to the 24th STS? And can you briefly explain to the audience what separates a CCT in the 24th Special Tactics Squadron from a CCT that's not in that element?
Yeah. So um, I would say going from a tier two combat control squadron to the tier one, which is the difference, tier one and tier two, is like being a senior in college professional athletics to going to the pros. Um, I do believe almost every combat controller could go to the tier one unit and be successful. A lot of them choose not to for a variety of reasons. It's a hard life and is extra hard on the families. Being a combat controller in and of itself is difficult on the person in the family. Going to the tier one unit is more so. And then the mission and the authorities are different, right? The mission of the tier one unit is counterterrorism, and they have different authorities to go do things. So when you go through the training, they absolutely take your skills from a graduate level to a PhD level. They absolutely do that. But they also focus very much on decision making and working autonomously because you might find yourself as one combat controller, one CAA guy, and one Delta or SEAL somewhere around the world having to make decisions that could have international implications. Um, so those are the differences. But I don't get wrapped around the axle. I know a lot of guys go, "Well, I was a tier one operator, and that makes me better." Well, it does in the sense that you applied for it, you went and did it, and you got some elevated training. But I believe almost every combat controller can go to the tier one units and do very well.
Did you want to go to the 24th STS just because you viewed it as this is the next challenge? Like, what was the motivation for wanting to go to the tier one?
Yeah, I tell you, I said this to Dan Schilling after I'd retired, and he laughed at me. He's like, "Yeah, that's you." Um, I've spent my entire life trying to prove that I can do that next thing. Why I'm wired that way, I don't know. But I always have been. And when I graduated combat control school, a bunch of guys from that unit showed up at our graduation. They showed up in civilian clothes, and they ended up talking to me and my dad. I think my mom was even there, and they're like, "Yeah, if you come to this unit, you can't have tattoos. Probably shouldn't have family. We do things that are unique." And I was like, "Cool, sign me up." uh, my dad's like, "Do you really want to go do that?" I'm like, "That's exactly where I want to be." So I left combat control school. I went out to McChord Air Force Base, served my first 2 years there. My boss there went to the 24th. He came back. He said, they asked, "Why aren't more young guys showing up?" I said, "I'm not ready. I'm not ready to go do that thing that my imagination has a mind's eye view of." I said, "I need another assignment." So I went to Germany, and that was a great move for me. I needed to mature emotionally, but I also needed to mature professionally. And when you go overseas, nobody can respond to Africa faster than the guys out of Germany. You just can't. Like it's a physics thing. So I got to do a lot of neat things while I was in Germany that put me in a position to be more ready to go to 24th when I went there.
And I guess I should have asked a little, I should have had you clarify. When you go to the 24th, it's not like the entire 24th, a bunch of CCTs deploy together, right? It's the one guy's going with Delta, one guy could be going with the SEALs. Could you explain kind of how it's, I don't know if farms out, but like you guys are getting assigned to different teams and you're acting in your role as the CCT in support of whether it's the SEALs, the Rangers, whatever it could be. That's correct, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So JSOC, it's Joint Special Operations Command, right? Joint being the key term there, and is made up of all the tier one units. And those tier one units work together to do a lot of things. They work together differently than combat control. So when I showed up to 24th, one of the first things they said to us is, "Hey, you are here to work in the seams." And it's a great analogy, or it's a great statement, really, because while Dev Group and Delta and the Rangers all work together, they are separate units and they work independently. Periodically, a person from the Rangers may go work with Delta, or a person from the SEALs may go work with Delta, or vice versa. But habitually, combat controllers are aligned with Delta Force, Dev Group, and the Rangers, and you cycle through those. So you're constantly working with all those units, and you're not just working with, you're living with them. So you do pre-alert with them, you do alert with them, and then you go to war with them, and you do that cycle over and over and over again. Sometimes you may be in a Navy cycle, sometimes you may be in a green Delta cycle, sometimes you may be in a Ranger cycle. my cycle happened, like I would do pre-alert with the Navy, alert with the Navy, come back, do alert with the Rangers, then I would do pre-alert with the Army, alert with the Army, and I just cycled like that. It just seemed like I had this really, what I would consider a perfect cycle. So I got to work with all of them all the time. And it was just a wonderful opportunity because you get to see the goods and the bads of how each unit does things. You get to learn from some of the best in the entire community. So yeah, it's a great experience.
And we're gonna get into your opinions kind of at the end. We always have a fun little thing we're gonna do with the SEALs and Delta. But before we're gonna do that, where were you on 9/11? And when did you realize that 9/11 is not an accident, that the country is now, the world has changed, we're at war?
Yeah. So another unique timing thing. So uh, I was an instructor at the schoolhouse from 98 to 01. And in the summer of 01, I was preparing to go back to the unit. I told them, hey, here's my desires, here's where we're going to go. And they said, absolutely, we'll bring you back up. And I was supposed to leave the schoolhouse, take some leave, and then show up to the unit and go sit some time on a team so that I can eventually take a team. That was the goal. Well, 9/11 was my last day at the schoolhouse, and it was just coincidental. It's not like 9/11 happened that they said we're moving you quickly. 9/11 was the day that I was going to finish my schoolhouse, and we were getting ready to put the students in the field, and they do this briefing for us to give us their op order before they go to the field, tell us what they're going to do and how it's going to go down, given the constraints we've given them. We're in the middle of this brief, and it's a sacrosanct time. Like nobody's allowed to walk in the room. It's the students' time to validate for us that they know what they're doing. One of my instructors walks in the room, and I turned to him and I give him the what the fuck look. I'm like, the fuck are you doing in here? He goes, dude, I got to turn the TV on. It's okay. So I'm pissed because nobody's ever allowed to do this. I'm the lead instructor. Turns the TV on, and when he turns the TV on, the second plane flies into the towers, and we all go, holy shit! So immediately we knew it was real. We knew it wasn't an accident because at this point we'd now been told the first tower had been hit, second tower had been hit, and the Pentagon had been hit. So we knew there was a pattern there. The unique thing is the combat control school is on the other side of the fence of the JSOC compound. So I immediately said, okay, we're going to stop what we're doing. We had students posted guarded all entryways to make sure nobody was going to come driving a car up there and try to put a bomb near the JSOC compound. And then we kind of went into contingency planning just to deal with what was going on in the immediate. Eventually, we ended up getting the students out in the field, and then my next day, I showed up at the unit. And, I went home that night. My wife's like, "Yep, we're not taking leave." I'm like, "No, we might still be able to take leave." She's like, "You're full of shit." She's like, "You're gonna go back to the unit, and 2 weeks from now, you'll be gone, and I'll see you when I see you." And she was right. As most of the conversations with my wife throughout my marriage, she was absolutely right. I showed up at the unit the next day. We immediately started planning for our first target. For the next 30 days, we worked 20-hour days prepping, and then we rolled out. And my wife and I had 2 days off that whole year together.
Well, that is, I mean, I'm speechless at that time, just that time turnover. And I like how you gave your wife a shout out. A lot of guys do, they're tough to leave your wife behind. I imagine tough when you got a family, but sounds like she absolutely understood. Let's get into now. You did 4 combat jumps. We're going to cover 3 of them during your time in Afghanistan.
Sure.
And I cannot wait to talk about this because this is unbelievably unique compared to, the average guest who might come on this show.